Hello and welcome. Thank you very much for taking the time to join me in this virtual session today. My name is Guy Eden and I'm responsible for product management for ControlM. In this session, we're going to talk you through some of our plans for the future of ControlM. There is forward-looking information all this, so of course we do have to remind you that some of these things are subject to change. The flip side of that is a lot of that change and a lot of this content is actually driven by what you tell us. So please, if there are things here that you find interesting, things that you want to talk about further, things that you think should be here and aren't, please reach out to us. We'll be very, very happy to hear and see how they fit into our plans. Before we start and go into the detail of functionality that we're planning to deliver, I'd like to give you a bit of insight into what frames our thinking around the product roadmap. And something that's very instructive is this quote from the former CIO of BMW. Child. This is fascinating. He says that BMW's competitors are not the typical automobile manufacturers that you may think of. They're not even the more innovative and new manufacturers like Tesla. He's looking at Microsoft and Google as the competition of the future. Two companies whose primary skill lies in the delivery of software. Microsoft, of course, is very involved in self-driving cars. Google has Waymo, its own self-driving car initiative, and the advantages that these kind of companies have are at the very least twofold. One is that they're agile. They can move very, very quickly. It's something they've learned to do over time. The irony in this particular example is that many of the agile techniques we use today in software started with the Toyota production system. But agility today is what they're very, very good at. The second thing is that these are companies that know all about scale and all about data. The kind of things you need when you're building a self-driving car include the ability to manage big data, the ability to do lots of machine learning and to manage the relevant pipelines involved, the ability to scale your infrastructure appropriately to manage those huge amounts of data. All things these companies are very, very good at. You'll have heard earlier in some of the other sessions about the autonomous digital enterprise, and this is a great example of that direction. From ControlM's point of view, we're looking in particular at some of the key tenets in the ADE. ControlM, of course, is an automation tool. So automation everywhere is precisely our sweet spot. And in fact, we see ourselves as enabling the ADE from the automation point of view. ControlM is increasingly used by many of our customers for machine learning pipelines, big data pipelines. The world of data is absolutely crucial here. And as you know, data is the new currency. Our ability to manage it is critical. And we increasingly have customers who want to be able to deploy applications into their production workflows in a way that ensures they have, for example, the latest build of those applications. Enterprise DevOps there is key, and your ability to manage the enterprise DevOps pipeline as well as part of an overall business process becomes more and more critical. So this is really fascinating. The other thing that guides when we look at our roadmap, some very, very basic principles. We continue to work to make ControlM easy to consume. ControlM started in a place where the number of personas, the types of users that were required to use it, were very restricted. Certain operators, job schedulers, administrative staff. Over time, of course, the number of personas has grown immeasurably. Today, we have many developers and DevOps staff using the system. We have file transfer teams. We have business users who want to monitor the progress of their business services. And we need to make sure that we're providing ControlM in a way that is easy to consume for all of those different types, as well as for the administrators and job schedulers who need to make sure that production workflows run on time, every time. We want to provide functionality that is comprehensive. Again, for each of those different personas, we need to be able to provide what they need to do their job, whether that's an API for developers or an easy mobile interface for business users, and so on and so forth. And of course, in the end, we're all about running your production systems and keeping production going. And that means that we need to make sure ControlM is reliable and robust. So those are some of the principles. Let's take an overview of what's coming up. I'll say at this point that in the course of the next year or so, there's a number of versions coming out. You'll have heard about ControlM SaaS. That's something that we'll be delivering at the end of this year. We'll talk more about that towards the end of this presentation. During the course of 2021, we'll be delivering fix packs and, of course, version 21 itself. What you're going to see here is a summary of things, some of which will be in 21, some of which may come later. The summary is what you see. We try and divide our roadmap up into a number of key and clear themes. First one is a great user experience. This is not only about getting a great user interface, but again, making sure that we have the tools for each of the different personas, types of user to use in a way that makes sense to them, and that means they enjoy using ControlM. Again, we'll go into more detail in some of these later on. Integrations, absolutely key themes for us in the near-term future. As environments become more and more complex and you're required to use more and more different types of services, and the number of services out there over and over and over again, it's absolutely critical that you're able to integrate to all of those services. Data, as we said, is the new currency, and you have to be able to move that currency around as easily as possible. So we continue to invest in our file transfer solutions. And of course, for our developers, we're continuing to provide new functionality in the API, along with other ways to make it easier to deploy your changes into workflows. And in the end, we're all about production. We're providing a number of new tools, particularly Workflow Optimizer, which is quite exciting, to enable the control of those production workflows. We'll talk about that in more detail later. Finally, SaaS, as we mentioned, this will be branded BMC Helix ControlM, a new ControlM offering provided as a service. We'll talk about that at the end. The last thing here is conversion. So we have customers who often have multiple orchestration tools and want to convert those into ControlM. We work a lot on providing automated. We need to augment those so we can convert from those other applications into Helix ControlM. And in the future, not on day one, we also want to be able to help you to convert ControlM into Helix ControlM, for those of you that are interested. Again, that's a longer term thing, that's not something for the near term. Let's drill down. So I talked about user experience. I want to consider particularly the user interface today. In version 20, we made a big effort to begin to move as much as we could from the desktop interface and into the web user interface. And we moved a lot. That effort continues. So just to give you a few examples of what's in our priority list there, Find and Update, which we've already done quite a lot of work on, will continue in 21. For example, we're going to support complex fields, which are currently not supported. We're going to improve the folders tool in the web interface, particularly around troubleshooting. For example, you can view unsynchronized folders between different systems. We're going to be able to compare job versions in the web interface, as you can in the desktop interface today. We're also going to provide import-export in a JSON format. XML already exists and is supported. JSON is really a much more modern technique for, modern language for importing and exporting workflows. And it's also much more in keeping with what we need in the SaaS world as well. I'll also mention that we continue to make a lot of improvements to our mobile interface. We've continued to improve the underlying infrastructure. We're working hard on ensuring consistency between the mobile interface and the new web interface, so that everyone has the same experience. And finally, I'll discuss documentation. Those of you who look at our SaaS offering will see the documentation looks very, very different. This is documentation that eventually will make its way onto the regular ControlM as well. You'll see that the documentation is much clearer, much more structured, has many more examples, and in fact, in the SaaS world, you'll also have a sort of walkthrough so that you can see exactly which fields you need to fill out when, for example, you're configuring a system. So a lot of work being done around the user experience in general and the user interface in particular. Let's move on to integrations. So this is a big, big theme for us. We know that in modern particularly in our world where we might have extremely hybrid and disparate environments, which include everything from mainframe, legacy applications, homegrown applications, open source based applications, applications in your data center, applications in private cloud, applications in a public cloud, SaaS applications, and all of these need to be connected to through ControlM. So we want to find ways to make the delivery of integrations much faster and much smoother. And we have two major initiatives that we're undertaking. The first is Integrations Factory. Integrations Factory covers a raft of different things to enable those integrations. First of all, many of you will be familiar with Application Integrator. For those of you who are not, Application Integrator is a feature of ControlM that enables you to define your own integrations based, for example, on REST APIs or command line interfaces. We want the Application Integrator even to use even more production ready. So we're going to invest a lot in making it much friendlier. We're going to make it friendlier for Python developers as well, which is a request that we've had very, very often. In addition to improving that infrastructure, we're also creating a dedicated team to deliver integrations based on Application Integrator itself. Some people would call that eating their own dog food. I prefer drinking your own champagne. But in any case, the plan is to begin to roll out more and more integrations based on that Application Integrator infrastructure. And that will be accompanied by a range of other initiatives, including broadening the use of the Application Integrator Hub, building a community around those integrations, and so on and so forth. Integrations Factory. The next big initiative is all around how we link to open source applications in general and Airflow in particular. So Airflow, many of you will know, is an orchestrator that's used in the world of big data. It's aimed primarily at programmers doing big data pipelines, Python programmers. In many cases, we have customers who use ControlM for their production workflow, for example, but their data teams might be using Airflow. And then when you need to bring the Airflow orchestration into production, you have to work out how to do it. There's a little bit of a burden there. We want to alleviate that burden. To that end, we're going to deliver an Airflow wrapper. The Airflow wrapper will enable you from within ControlM to connect to an Airflow DAG. That's a directed acyclic graph in the jargon, but it's the workflow that exists within Airflow itself. And you'll be able to monitor what's going on in that DAG, trigger workflows within Airflow, and also actually see inside and see some of the details of what's happening in the DAG. Again, all within ControlM. So you're exploiting the operational capabilities in a single window of ControlM without needing to rewrite what's already been done in Airflow. So integration, very big theme for us. We hope that's exciting. I'm going to move on now to file transfer. Once again, we know we need to move data around very easily. MFT is the cornerstone of many of our customers' data pipelines and machine learning pipelines. We're continuing to invest in MFT, in particular, improving the cloud support. You can connect with MFT today to Azure and to Google, but it's a little bit roundabout. We want to make that interface much smoother, much more native. So that's one of the things we're doing. For those of you that are using MFT Enterprise, sometimes known as B2B, once again, we'll continue to invest there, both in security and in providing your end users with the best experience. To that end, we'll have forward proxy support. That's going to make particularly the sending of outbound files to multiple business partners more secure and easier to configure. We're going to enable you to define your own policies for the users, the external users coming from your business partners, and to provide a more uniform experience for your business partners, you'll be able to white label the file exchange interface. Those are some things coming on MFT. Moving on to our solutions for developers. Really important for us to ensure that we've got great solutions for developers and for DevOps staff. We're continuing to augment the API. As many of you will know by now, the API is actually released on a monthly basis. We've recently added, for example, support for import and export of SLA BIM jobs. We also have export capabilities for calendars, something that's been requested for a very long time. Coming soon, we'll have alert management, which will enable you to create interfaces, for example, with ticketing systems in a much, much easier way. We're also going to take a long look at the performance of the API. happily, the API has seen a very, very large rate of adoption over the last year or so. We need to make sure that its performance keeps up with that rate of adoption. So we're going to be doing a lot of benchmarking on the API in the near future. Apart from that, we're continuing to improve our best practice documentation and also providing some enhancements around site standards. In particular, you'll be able to import and export site standards in the JSON format, which will enable you to version and control those standards, keep them in a configuration management system, and so on. Moving on, this big theme, control, monitor, optimize production. So we have a few things going on here, and one of the biggest initiatives is something that we're calling Workflow Optimizer. Workflow Optimizer is going to be an add-on, not going to be in the framework of a release. And our slogan around Workflow Optimizer is present, resolve, optimize. We've heard a lot from many of our customers of a number of challenges in managing their production workflows. In many cases, there are increasingly large numbers of developers working with ControlM, and the ability of the ops team to manage what the developers are doing and what they're putting into production is getting harder and harder. In order to help them, we want to be able to prevent errors and inefficiencies in those things, in the things the developers are doing in advance. Even if we can do all that, we still occasionally have problems, we have errors. We want to be able to get to the root cause of those errors as fast as possible. And for those companies that have large workflows, we want to be able to optimize those workflows and make sure they're running as efficiently as possible. So under the heading of prevent, for example, one of the things we're looking at doing is when a developer comes to make a change in a workflow, we want to be able to give him some measure of how risky that change is. Is he going to impact the critical part of the service? Is this job part of some critical SLA, for example? Are there conditions associated with this job that could impact some job much further down the line, not necessarily visible? So all these things are things that we want to bring together and make very, very visible to anybody who's making changes in production. Make sure the developers are aware of what they're doing, and also give the operators some kind of risk metric so they can see that if something's low risk, very easy to check in. If it's higher risk, maybe before they promote it, they want to have a 4 eyes check, review it again, and make sure that it's not going to introduce any problems. Resolve, once again, is all about resolving the root causes of problems when they occur. In order to achieve this, we're going to have mechanisms that aggregate many of the log files, of which are a little bit disparate today. We'll use techniques that will enable us to see changes in those log files and correlate those changes to particular errors, for example. We'll run anomaly detection across those logs to potentially even resolve errors before they occur. And the final pillar here is optimize. So this is all about taking existing workflows and looking for inefficiencies. This could be starting from simple things like have agents or jobs that never or very, very, very rarely run, and all the way through to sophisticated techniques like process mining, which use statistical and artificial intelligence methods to analyze the workflow and work out if it can be made a lot more efficient by running in a different way, for example. That's Workflow Optimizer. That's going to be an add-on. Very, very exciting. That's going to take a lot of the flows in ControlM to the next level. Also, under the framework of improved production, we put security and architecture. Obviously, we continue to improve security all the time. I just want to highlight a couple of things here. One of the big things that's been requested for quite a while now, I'm very happy to announce that we're putting support in for vaults, particularly CyberArk. This should work with other types of vaults as well. So this, of course, will reduce the burden on administrators. It'll be a lot easier to manage passwords and users because they're all stored in the vault. ControlM will have a standard interface that you won't need to go in and make any changes or hold passwords and usernames within ControlM. As part of that, we'll also support single sign-on using SAML2, another oft-requested feature. And the other thing that I'll point out here of the things on the slide is RBA. So in V20, we introduced role-based administration. To remind you, that allows you to delegate the administration of a particular connectivity to a particular team. So for example, you may want to delegate everything to do with SAP, the SAP team. You may want them to deal with connection profiles and agent configuration and so on, but without obviously allowing them administrative access to any other parts of the system. So that was RBA that we introduced in 20. There are a few things that we need to finish off there. One of those is support for host groups, and that will be coming out later on. We also continue, of course, to make architectural changes in the system in order to improve performance and scalability and robustness and so on. We're making a lot of those in particular for our SaaS solutions, Helix ControlM, but those will also have a knock-on effect on the on-prem solution. They will lead eventually to reduced downtime, particularly around upgrades. Let's talk about Helix ControlM. So this is very exciting. This is a new major step in the evolution of ControlM. This is our SaaS solution that will be coming out towards the end of this year. Let me say a couple of words about why, although that should be fairly obvious, I think, nowadays. But there are a few important things that I do want to say about why we're bringing this out, apart from the fact that it's been requested by many, many people, particularly by operations staff who want to be able to provide an agile service to their lines of business, for example. So there's lots of standard reasons why you should take SaaS, of course. There are many companies now who have a first policy. In the world of ControlM, there's a particular challenge, which is that a line of business may need an orchestration solution. But ControlM is something that sits in central IT and maybe feels a bit heavy. Helix ControlM will enable the line of business to run in as agile a way as they like. It will enable them to use ControlM, completely SaaS configuration, very, very simple to install, very, very simple to get running, suits everything they need, well suited for managing machine learning pipelines, data pipelines, and anything else they might need. At the same time, it's ControlM that the IT guys, maybe I'll say love. It means that it comes with all the robustness of ControlM, all the compliance you need in ControlM, all the security. So when it comes time to put what the line is doing into production, you do that safely, knowing that it's ControlM and it's all about running your production systems. So really, this is giving you the best of all possible worlds. I'll say also from our point of view, it's a great thing because it enables us to focus on making sure that you're successful in your business outcomes. It means that we can orient our roadmap much more precisely to what you're doing and spend, for example, less time supporting infrastructural elements. So what's going to be in Helix ControlM? All of the core functionality that you know is going to be there. The underlying infrastructure is ControlM, so it's going to be very familiar for all of you who know ControlM. It's going to have all the core functionality. There are some things that will necessarily change because this is a SaaS solution. So, for example, user management is necessarily slightly different. Agent installation, necessarily slightly different. Some things are not relevant to us on day one. So, for example, mainframe support is not there. We're also not going to support some of the less used job types. You can see on the screen that all of the common ones are there, including file transfer, including SAP, obviously support for application integrator. So all those things are there. There are a few things that need to be re-architected in a SaaS world, and we decided to do that a little further down the line. So, for example, archiving is not there on day one, but everything else that you can see there is. So this is very exciting, I would say, big step forward for ControlM. This will be out at the end of the year. If you're interested in this, please talk to your account managers. I will stress again, we're not migrating from on-prem to SaaS. It's not something we want to do. We do want to continue supporting you on premises as you need it or in the cloud, but at the same time, providing more agile, easy to use SaaS solution. I'll end just by reminding you of some of those key principles. Thank you very much for your time. If you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you have suggestions for a roadmap, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of